Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode on Talk Architecture podcast with your host Naziaty Mohd Yaacob. Earlier, I was commenting on the Malaysian Architecture Week review, and I was focusing on the Malaysian Architecture Dialogue. Now, in conclusion, from that podcast episode, I've stated that there is a little small opening that was created by the participants on the Malaysian Architecture Dialogue and reasoned to have some sort of a discourse, some sort of a debate, some sort of banter, some sort of trying to get out in the open the discussion about the situation with the Malaysian architects and architecture. Now, I did quote a few keywords that I garnered from this experience going to the MAW event on 14 June 2025. And those keywords are awards, heroes, pride, bracket, or managing egos. We could say also egos and bracket managing it. But let's go and put that to a side and concentrate on just something that came out during the discussion, which is awards. And there was a conversation going on at the end of the session with the moderation, and the issue of awards came up. Now, personally, I think that awards is just syok sendiri lah. It's in Malay means that you just something that amongst us we just get excited about. But the evaluation and the critique on architecture by the public, people who use the building, in a sense, a more intersectional way of looking at it rather than just closed and exclusively architect bantering about architecture and aesthetics, is something that has been going on a lot. And we have our masters in Western architecture education, Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, Frank Lloyd Wright, and the sense of beauty and proportion from these architecture starting in the West with the Renaissance and classical orders and so on. We also now refer to other ways of talking about the embellishment or the enclosure rather than just talking about facadism or, looking at it in terms of aesthetics and not looking beyond aesthetics. So we are looking beyond aesthetics. We are looking at inclusivity. We're looking at usability, accessibility, safety, and other issues, not in terms of the way that building surveyors and engineers think about them, but also architects think about them. And there was a time in 1960s when you have forum architecture, or a bunch of architects from the Netherlands, Van Eyck and Herman Herzberger, talking about social architecture. Then you have a time when functionalism emerged in an international style. And but that is quite something to do with still the organization of space, still the order and proportion issues. And aesthetic has always been not only about, shall we say, the form-making aspect, but also aesthetics about how people would feel when they're in the architecture. And we have phenomenology and how that influence with certain writings like Johanni Palasma and Christian Norbert Schultz, and even going into certain architects' work, such as the architects, it is not crossing my mind at the moment, but oh my God, Zumthor. Yeah, Peter Zumthor. And architects are thinking about sensorial experience of architecture. Now, that is good because we're taking away architecture from just embellishment and form making. We're taking away architecture from just modeling it, 3D modeling it, and going into the experience of it. We're taking architecture inside. And therefore, we're looking at Malaysian identity in architecture. The awards, getting an award in architecture, and getting an award not only in architecture, but in other sectors. Developers get awards. Local authorities give themselves awards. It's kind of like something that is trendy, and then the meaning of the awards themselves is less impactful. So this is the day and age of awards, meaning that you're giving awards to your people who you know. I mean, in your sectors, and you need to respect each other in a way to manage each other's egos so that everybody wins, right? A win-win situation. So who loses in this win-win situation? Is it the public? Is it the user of the building? I am a person who uses the building, and so are you. So do you, And so do you feel bad about using buildings sometimes, how difficult it is to use buildings? And if you're a disabled person like me, we do have certain challenges like the wrong slope design or gradient of a ramp, or the need for a ramp at all, or the difficulties in using a space and so on, because of cost implications that is needed by the building owner or the developer to adhere to, so that, this resulted in us a bit difficult using the corridor space, turning radius, reaching for the switches and the taps. So a bit of like ticking the boxes on standardization. But architecture is everything, isn't it? It's not only about form making or having it to look good. And the awards given could be on sustainability or accessibility and universal design, which we haven't yet anyway. But green building or platinum or gold status or bronze, and we give it among ourselves in architecture awards, and developers give it among themselves as well. And planners also give among themselves. So all of us are excited about awards. But the meaning of the awards will never actually be meaningful, really meaningful, if it's not being felt by others who use the buildings outside of the exclusive club that we are in, no matter whether it's architects, developers, or planners. So sometimes we just like to blame the local authority for being so strict or not lenient, or, being so boring, the regulations killing us, our creativity. But the funny thing is, local authority and developers and their consultants, local authorities is the reactive process, where the developers and clients with the consultants is the proactive process of development. So when they apply for to get the planning approval, building plan approval, and so on, they have to go through the local authority. That's the basic basic processes. I'm not talking about the JKR or the Public Works Department processes. I'm talking about local authorities. So we see that there needs to be a whole system that's integrated from the reactive process to the proactive processes, and that there is some sort of respectability. Each of us are doing our jobs. And that we need to actually look at what's the most important thing. The livable city idea, the fact that the citizens and the residents are very happy and they have seamless connectivity between, one, seamless connectivity between different neighborhoods and a good public transportation system. The over-reliance with private vehicles need to be balanced out in a much more sustainable city. We know all that. So the language that we talk about awards need to be something that everybody feels for it, not just certain groups like architects, planners, and developers. So now that is the story of the award system, in which the conversation refers to that. The conversation going forward is looking at aging population. The conversation looking forward is like sustainable in the truest sense, in the different building types, right? You have religious buildings, you have banks and financial institutions, you have community buildings, schools, universities, colleges, you have the street environment, you have markets, you have places with social interaction, you have parks and leisure facilities, and you have these issues of accessibility, usability, and safety, all incorporated in this idea of a livable town and neighborhood. So architects are part of it, not the main person. They are part of it in the sense that they are very important in trying to get those ideas and objectives to be realized along with the planners, the developers, and so on. So awards has to be critical in a way that everyone can say something about it. Everyone has access to it. Everyone understands that an award is you give to people that they did a good job. And they did a good job not because of only a few people think that they did a good job, but everybody thinks they did a good job. It's like the best football player in the world. Everybody think that person deserves it with all the statistics and so on that shows that they fully deserves it. I was mentioning about Western architecture and the heroes that we have. Of course, now in this day and age, we have contemporary heroes. We look towards people's writings and we keep on reading them because they make sense to our work. And these heroes are heroes, but in the discussion that we had at the Malaysian Architecture Week, the heroes that we were mentioning during the discussion related to those Western architects since God knows when in the last century, even at the turn of the not this century, the last century, but before that. Frank Lloyd Wright was before that, right? And the Le Corbusiers and the Mies van der Rohes. So we've gone away from that and we're looking at contemporary heroes. And of course, these heroes give an idea that what sort of architecture that we're going for. And architecture has a lot to do with a lot of things: material science, construction, the whole philosophy and theory, and the contextual and site issues, and cultural backgrounds, and many other stuff going on, as we mentioned. And those heroes that does stuff above and beyond or be critical about what architecture is, they could be writing about it, or they could be doing architecture work that makes sense, that is bringing back a certain sense of belonging, a communal sense, green sort of sustainability, awareness, looking at this whole system of recycling and reusing. I mean, there are all sorts of heroes out there who people look at what they're doing and think that that's really great. I can learn from that, and I can also innovate something like that. So heroes are giving examples. Heroes are roles and precedents in our society, which they could be not alive at the moment. They could have been in the past, but many are still alive, and many are still doing what they need to do or want to do in order to keep that critique going and the dialogue going. So heroes, as opposed to mentors, mentor is much more accessible. They're like coach, and they talk to you and they have dialogue and conversation. That's what the Malaysian Architecture Week is about. And that is something that is important, that's happening, that we're having this conversation with our mentors. And that's when Firdaus mentioned in his post about listening to the seniors. That is about mentoring. And there's a coming Borat session with a much more senior group of people that would want to give advice, would want to be seeing the audience are younger people, would want to make a point that is important in the context of Malaysian architecture dialogue. And they may not be a hero, but they are certainly a mentor. And it's great if they could be your coach. You could be working with them, and then you're more of a coach, obviously. If you could have time with them and get to find out what it is, how it is to make ourselves get to be better and so on in being in architecture practice. I don't really want to talk about egos because everybody has them, and especially in the architecture fraternity where, everybody has them, because in a way, architects need to realize that they were sort of grown up or educated or understand about egos from the very beginning. And in the world of creating stuff, and being able to control the creation process, developing something from the beginning to the end, is very much ego driven in a lot of ways. It's not usual that we could 100% be in collaboration with another person or our team members. There is always a certain direction, a certain creative, master that has some sort of ego to go and take from from the beginning to the end of the project and get it to be completed. If they could preserve the concept right until the building, that is a great feat indeed, because there are a lot of teamwork going on and carrying on with the documentation and getting the drawings to actually depict what you want to visualize in the beginning, and getting it to be in built form is such a great feat. And once you got it done, that's the biggest ego trip that you can have. So this is a session that I would like to say review number 2 on the Malaysian Architecture Week and the Malaysian Architecture Dialogue that started on June the 14th. And we carry on because there will be other Borat session, and we'd like to see it continue after that and in many other discussions in the future. So again, good job for making this event happen. And let's see that we get to actually open wider the discussion and the dialogue. And it's just, today's a topic on awards, heroes, and pride, or managing egos. So guys, thank you very much for listening, and we shall meet again in the next podcast episode on Talk Architecture. And I'm your host, Naziaty Mohd Yaacob. Thank you.